He thought age would repel her.
But their chemistry was irresistible. Seeds of an unlikely connection. Marcus Reed peered through his microscope, the familiar ache in his lower back reminding him of his 45 years. The specimen, a resilient desert flower that bloomed only once a decade, demanded his complete attention, yet his mind wandered to the email that had disrupted his carefully constructed solitude. Dr. Lyra Celine, arriving tomorrow. 28 years old. Brilliant. Award-winning research on extraterrestrial botany. He sighed, running his hand along the scarred side of his face. The laboratory explosion 7 years ago had left more than physical marks. It had driven him to this remote research station in the New Mexico desert, where plants made far more predictable companions than people. This isn't a teaching facility, he muttered to himself, adjusting the microscope's focus. His fingers, calloused but precise, moved with practiced efficiency. I don't need some eager young scientist disrupting my work. When the Research Foundation had insisted on sending Dr. Selene to collaborate with him on identifying potential Earth plants that could survive on Mars, he'd resisted. Eventually, he'd relented on the condition that her stay would be brief. 3 months? No longer. The next morning arrived with the desert's typical dramatic sunrise, painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Marcus stood at the landing pad, squinting against the sun as the small research helicopter approached. His hands fidgeted at his sides, one thumb tracing the burn scars that extended from his right hand up to his elbow. The helicopter landed in a swirl of dust, and moments later, Dr. Lyra Celine emerged. She wasn't what he'd expected. Instead of the bookish academic he'd imagined, she moved with confident grace, her dark curls whipping around her face in the helicopter's dying breeze. She wore practical field clothes, cargo pants and a light linen shirt, but there was something undeniably striking about her. Dr. Reed, she called over the fading noise, approaching with an extended hand. Thank you for having me. Your work on extremophilic plant adaptation is legendary. Marcus accepted her handshake reluctantly, acutely aware of his scarred hand touching her smooth one. Dr. Celine, welcome to the Ajo Research Station. His voice was gruffer than he'd intended. She smiled, unfazed. Please call me Lyra. The lab is this way, he said, ignoring her invitation to familiarity. I've allocated space for your equipment. As they walked through the compound, a collection of efficient, solar-powered buildings nestled against red rock formations, Lyra kept pace easily, asking insightful questions about his current research. Despite his resistance, Marcus found himself responding in detail, surprised by her knowledge. Your paper on mycorrhizal fungi adaptations was brilliant, she said as he showed her the laboratory. I've been building on that work for potential Mars applications. Mars, he echoed, shaking his head slightly. Plants have enough challenges surviving on Earth? Lyra's eyes lit up. That's exactly why your expertise is invaluable. If we understand how plants adapt to Earth's harshest environments, we can engineer solutions for Mars colonization. Her enthusiasm was disarming. Marcus found himself studying her animated features as she explained her theories, the way her eyes, a striking amber color, seemed to reflect her passion for the subject. I've prepared the guest quarters, he said finally, interrupting her. You can settle in today. We'll begin work tomorrow. Lyra nodded, her smile undimmed by his brusqueness. I look forward to it, Dr. Reed. As he walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that Dr. Lyra Celine might disrupt far more than just his research schedule. Growing curiosity. 2 weeks into their collaboration, Marcus found himself watching Lyra as she carefully transplanted seedlings into the specialized growth medium they had developed. Her movements were precise, her focus absolute as she handled each delicate plant with reverent care. You have good hands for this work, he commented, surprised by his own words. Compliments weren't his usual language. Lyra glanced up, a small smile playing across her lips. My grandmother was a gardener. She said plants respond to touch just like people do. Some need firmness, others gentleness. Marcus nodded, turning back to his notes to hide the unexpected warmth in his face. Their daily routine had fallen into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. Mornings were spent in the lab, afternoons in the greenhouse, and evenings analyzing data. Despite his initial reluctance, he found Lyra's presence increasingly tolerable. More than tolerable, if he was honest with himself. I think these Atacama specimens are our best candidates, Lyra said, moving beside him to examine his notes. She stood close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender from her hair. They've already adapted to minimal water and extreme temperature fluctuations. Marcus became acutely aware of the contrast between them, her smooth skin against his weathered complexion, her youth against his middle age. He stepped back slightly, creating distance. You're right, he agreed, keeping his voice professional, but we need to run more radiation resistance tests. Mars has no magnetic field to protect against cosmic radiation. I brought some equipment for that, Lyra said, excitement animating her features. We could set up the test tonight if you're not too tired. He should have said no. Should have maintained the boundaries he'd established. Instead, he heard himself say, I'll make coffee. That night stretched into the early morning hours as they worked side by side, testing plant samples under simulated Martian radiation conditions. The lab, normally Marcus's sanctuary of solitude, felt different with Lyra there, warmer somehow, filled with her questions and theories that challenged and expanded his own thinking. When she laughed at something, he said, a dry observation about academia that he hadn't intended as humor, Marcus felt something long dormant stir within him. The sound of her laughter was like water in the desert. You know, Lyra said, examining a readout. Everyone told me you were brilliant but impossible to work with. They said you'd send me packing within days. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I considered it. What changed your mind? Her amber eyes held genuine curiosity. He looked down at the plant sample between them, a hardy succulent that had survived conditions that should have killed it. You ask good questions, he said finally. And you don't waste time with small talk. Lyra's smile widened. High praise from the notorious Dr. Reed. Don't push your luck, he replied, but found himself smiling too, the scarred side of his face pulling slightly with the unfamiliar movement. Later that week, when a supply helicopter delivered packages, Lyra received several boxes of personal items she'd left behind in her rush to join the project. Marcus helped her carry them to her quarters. Thanks, she said, opening one box to reveal books, actual paper books. I know it's old-fashioned, but I can't sleep without reading first. Marcus noted the titles, botanical texts, but also poetry and classical literature. Thoreau? He asked, spotting a familiar spine. You've read him? Lyra's expression brightened. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he quoted quietly. To front only the essential facts of life, she continued, her voice soft, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. Their eyes met over the open box, and for a moment Marcus forgot about the years between them, forgot about his scars and solitude. He saw only Lyra, intelligent, curious, seeing him not as damaged or difficult, but as a person worth understanding. The moment stretched, electric and fragile, until Marcus cleared his throat and stepped back. We should get back to work, he said, retreating to familiar territory. But as they walked back to the lab, something had shifted between them, like a seed cracking open in the dark soil, reaching silently toward the light. Blossoming trust. A month into their collaboration, disaster struck. A shipment of experimental fertilizer was contaminated, triggering a cascade of plant deaths in their most promising test group. Marcus worked frantically to salvage what he could, while Lyra analyzed the contamination to prevent further spread. We've lost nearly 60%, Marcus said grimly as midnight approached. His back ached from hours hunched over the specimens trying to separate healthy tissue from dying plants. But we've saved 40%, Lyra countered, her optimism unwavering despite exhaustion shadowing her eyes. And I've identified the contaminant. It's a fungal strain, aggressive but treatable. They worked through the night, taking short breaks only when absolutely necessary. During one such break, as they sat on the lab floor sharing a package of stale crackers, Lyra asked the question Marcus had been dreading. How did it happen? Your accident? His instinct was to deflect, to shut down the conversation as he had countless times before. But something in her direct gaze, free from pity or morbid curiosity, made him answer honestly. Unstable compound. I was trying to develop a growth accelerator for crops in drought-stricken regions. His fingers unconsciously traced the scars on his face. The explosion killed my research partner. Thomas was 28, your age. Brilliant mind. Lyra was silent for a moment. Is that why you were reluctant to work with me? Marcus looked away. You didn't deserve my prejudice. It wasn't prejudice, she said quietly. It was grief. The simple truth of her words pierced through defenses built over 7 years of isolation. Yes, he admitted, his voice rough. I couldn't save him. After that, I decided it was safer to work alone. Lyra's hand found his scarred one, her touch light but steady. Thank you for telling me. He expected her to pull away. The scarred tissue was rough under her fingers, but she didn't. Instead, she began tracing the patterns of his scars with gentle curiosity. These are part of you, she said. They tell the story of your dedication to your work, to helping others. Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. Most people find them repulsive. I'm not most people, she replied with a small smile, and I've never found passion repulsive. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility, but the lab alarm interrupted, indicating the next treatment cycle for their plants. The moment broke as they returned to work. By morning, they had stabilized the remaining specimens. Exhausted but triumphant, they stumbled out of the lab into the desert sunrise. The landscape stretched before them, painted in golds and reds as the sun climbed over the distant mountains. It's beautiful, Lyra murmured, swaying slightly with fatigue. Without thinking, Marcus steadied her with an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest with natural ease. The contact sent warmth spreading through him, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. You should rest, he said, his voice lower than usual. Lyra looked up at him, her amber eyes holding his gaze. So should you. But neither moved away. Instead, they stood together watching the sunrise, their silhouettes merging into one against the brightening sky. In that moment, Marcus realized that somewhere between soil samples and late-night discussions, Lyra had planted herself firmly in the landscape of his life, and against all odds, something new was growing. Weathering the storm 6 weeks into their collaboration, the desert revealed its mercurial nature. What began as distant thunder evolved into a massive dust storm, sweeping toward the research station with alarming speed. We need to secure the greenhouse, Marcus called over the rising wind as they rushed to protect their work. The solar panels are designed to withstand these conditions, but the experimental plots are vulnerable. Lyra nodded, already moving to gather their most precious specimens. Outside, the sky had turned an ominous orange-brown, the sun obscured by swirling dust. They worked methodically, moving plants inside and sealing the greenhouse vents. The last weather report didn't predict anything this severe, Lyra said, brushing dust from her hair as they finally secured the outer doors of the main facility. Desert storms are unpredictable, Marcus replied, activating the station's emergency protocols. Screens throughout the building displayed the storm's progress, a massive system that would likely isolate them for days. Communications might go down, but we have sufficient supplies. As if on cue, the satellite connection flickered and died. The station, designed for self-sufficiency, hummed with backup systems activating. Outside, the world disappeared into a howling wall of dust and wind. Well, Lyra said with forced lightness, I guess we're not going anywhere for a while. The storm brought an unexpected intimacy as they moved through the confined spaces of the station. Meals became longer affairs, conversations stretching beyond work into personal territories. Marcus found himself sharing stories he'd nearly forgotten, of his childhood in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by towering trees and constant rain, so different from this desert he now called home. Is that why you have such an affinity for plants? Lyra asked on the second night, as they shared a simple dinner of pasta and rehydrated vegetables. Growing up in a forest? Marcus considered this. Perhaps. My father was a logger. He saw the forest as a resource. My mother was a botanist. She taught me to see it as a community. He smiled slightly at the memory. They argued constantly but loved each other deeply. They sound wonderful, Lyra said softly. They would have liked you, he replied without thinking, then felt heat rise to his face at the implication that she was someone significant in his life, someone he would introduce to family. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, but rather than looking uncomfortable, she smiled. I would have liked to meet them. The storm outside intensified on the third night, wind rattling the reinforced windows. Unable to sleep, Marcus found Lyra in the small common area, wrapped in a blanket reading by the dim emergency lighting. "Thoreau again?" he asked, noticing the book in her hands. She nodded, making space for him on the couch. "I find his thoughts on solitude comforting during storms." She hesitated, then asked, "Why did you really agree to let me stay? You could have refused the Foundation's request." Marcus sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her blanket-wrapped form. "I told myself it was because the Foundation controls my funding," he admitted. "But I think I was tired of my own company. And now?" Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the sound of the storm. "Now I'm—" The words stuck in his throat, unfamiliar after years of emotional solitude. "I'm glad you're here, Lyra." She shifted closer, her shoulder touching his. "Even though I asked too many questions." "Especially because of that," he said, surprising himself with a low chuckle. "You make me think differently." The emergency lights flickered, momentarily plunging them into darkness. When they returned, Lyra was looking at him with an expression that made his heart race like it hadn't in years. "Marcus," she said, his name sounding different in her voice. "I know there are reasons, many logical reasons, why this is complicated, but I need to tell you that Her courage faltered, but her eyes held his, communicating what words couldn't. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Marcus raised his hand to her face. His scarred fingers contrasted starkly against her smooth cheek. But she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "This isn't what you came here for," he murmured, his last attempt at resistance. Lyra opened her eyes, determination replacing vulnerability. "Maybe it's exactly what I came here for. Not just the science, but finding someone who sees the world the way I do, who challenges me, who doesn't think my dreams of growing gardens on other planets are childish fantasies." "They're not fantasies," he said softly. "They're the future." Her smile at his words undid him completely. When she leaned forward, bridging the final distance between them, Marcus met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened with a hunger that surprised them both. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the storm raged unnoticed around them. In that moment, as Lyra's hands traced the contours of his face, scarred and unscarred alike, with equal tenderness, Marcus felt the last of his defenses crumble. Age, experience, past failures, none of it mattered in the warmth of her embrace and the silent promise of her kiss. Cultivated love. The storm passed, leaving the desert transformed. New contours shaped the landscape, and tiny dormant seeds, awakened by the rare moisture, began to push through the soil in an unexpected bloom. The research station, too, felt changed, filled with a quiet energy that hummed between its two occupants. "The satellite connection should be restored by this afternoon," Marcus said over breakfast a week after the storm had cleared. "The supply helicopter will probably come tomorrow." Lyra nodded, her fingers lightly entwined with his on the table between them. "I've been thinking about what happens next." The question had hovered between them unspoken until now. Their collaboration had 6 weeks remaining according to the original agreement, but everything had changed. What had begun as a professional partnership had blossomed into something neither had anticipated. "I have to present our findings at the International Terraforming Conference in Geneva next month," Lyra continued when Marcus remained silent. "But after that, you'll have offers from every major research institution." Marcus finished for her, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the tightness in his chest. "Your career is just beginning, Lyra. You shouldn't tie yourself to a remote station in the middle of nowhere." Lyra's amber eyes flashed with sudden intensity. "Don't do that. Don't make decisions for me based on what you think I should want." Marcus sighed, running his scarred hand through his graying hair. "I'm trying to be realistic." "You're brilliant, young, and perfectly capable of knowing my own mind," she interrupted. She softened, taking both his hands in hers. "The work we're doing here, it matters. Not just for Mars, but for Earth too. These adaptive techniques could help restore ecosystems devastated by climate change. The work could continue without me," he pointed out. "The Foundation would—" "This isn't just about the work," Lyra said quietly. "It's about us, what we've found together." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Marcus. Not in spite of your age or your scars or your ridiculous stubbornness, but because of them. Because they're part of who you are." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Marcus felt something shift inside him. the final wall crumbling, the last defense against hope falling away. "I love you too," he said, the words rusty from disuse but no less true. "But loving someone means wanting what's best for them." "Then trust me to know what that is," she replied firmly. 3 months later, as autumn painted the desert in subtle shades of gold and amber, they stood together in the expanded greenhouse. The facility had grown, funded by a new grant based on their groundbreaking research. Solar arrays glinted in the distance, powering additional laboratories where a small team of researchers, handpicked by both of them, now worked. "Dr. Abrams wants to try your radiation-resistant grafting technique on the pine seedlings," Lyra said, reviewing notes on her tablet. She had returned from Geneva triumphant, their research hailed as revolutionary, but more importantly, she had returned to him. "Our technique," Marcus corrected gently, placing a hand at the small of her back. "It wouldn't have worked without your modifications." She smiled up at him, her face more familiar to him now than his own. Partnership has its advantages. Beyond the greenhouse windows, the desert stretched vast and beautiful, harsh yet teeming with hidden life. Like their relationship, it defied conventional expectations, thriving where others might see only impossibility. That evening, as they sat on the observation deck watching stars emerge in the clear desert sky, Marcus took Lyra's hand, rubbing his thumb over the simple silver band on her finger, a recent addition that still surprised him every time he saw it. "When you first arrived," he said thoughtfully, "I was certain you'd leave as soon as your assignment was complete. I never imagined—" He gestured to the expanded facility, to the life they were building together. Lyra leaned against his shoulder, her warmth a constant comfort. "Science teaches us to question our assumptions," she murmured, "to remain open to unexpected outcomes. Is that what I am? An unexpected outcome?" he asked, amusement coloring his voice. She turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting starlight. "You're the hypothesis I never knew I was testing. The theory that love doesn't follow conventional patterns or predictable variables." Marcus cupped her face, marveling at the softness of her skin beneath his weathered hands. "And your conclusion, Dr. Celine Reed?" "That some experiments," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him, "are worth continuing indefinitely." As their lips met under the vast desert sky, Marcus reflected that life, like the hardiest desert plants, often found unexpected ways to flourish. What had begun as an unwanted disruption to his carefully constructed solitude had transformed into the greatest discovery of his life. Proof that connection, like adaptation, was not limited by circumstance or time, but flourished wherever it found fertile ground and patient tending. In Lyra's embrace, he had found not just a partner in research, but in life itself, an unexpected bloom in the desert of his existence, more beautiful for being so completely unforeseen.